Thank you. Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. Typical.
Members, I cannot continue with this session. I don't have
We don't have a quorum.
of members. Can you kindly call members back to the House, please?
We don't have a quorum. Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. It's an honor to stand here to join this debate. But I want to crave your indulgence, Madam Presiding Officer, to do three things really quickly. The first thing, Madam Presiding Officer, is to say a hearty on this Carnival Thursday, a hearty congratulations to 𝐷𝐶 and Cats and Jammers for winning Panorama yet again. And allow me to also crave your indulgence, and I'm glad the member for Palliative and so forth came, because when I sit, I am going to crave your indulgence to leave and then come back, because I would like to go to the celebration for Deuce that is happening at this time with our school children. Madam Presiding Officer, you know, I sat here and I listened to my colleague, the Assistant Secretary with responsibility for community development, youth development, and sport, indicate to the people of Tobago that it is a time for all hands on deck. And he said it multiple times, and we spoke about the fact that there's limited resources. We spoke about the fact that, you know, all of those things, and he said all hands on deck. And somehow the member on the other side possibly did not listen to the motion at all, did not read the motion at all, and possibly did not listen to the member at all, because at no time did the member blame the workers or anything like that. But it is clear that what just happened, Madam Presiding Officer, is that the minority leader came with a script which he read, and he does not understand that debating requires you to actually listen to what people say and then respond, Madam Presiding Officer. I also promise to not be very long again. Celebrations are happening. How are we going to do this? And I kind of wished, Madam Presiding Officer, that the member had stayed, because having asked all of those questions, he conveniently is not here to hear the responses again. So how do we do this? The act of increasing productivity is one that requires, as the minority leader indicated, us looking at numbers, us looking at benchmarks, us looking at targets. And this Tobago House of Assembly, led by the Honorable Chief Secretary and this Tobago People's Party administration, even though we came into a space where there was no strategic plan, and it is strange that he will talk about not having a strategic plan and all of that, when in fact the organization that he's a part of did not have a strategic plan, and their strategic plan was old, and they spent money on doing it over, and it lapsed again, and didn't do anything in the strategic plan at that point. So it is kind of hypocritical, Madam Presiding Officer, to come here and expect, maybe it's not hypocritical, it is high expectations for those of us in the Tobago People's Party, and we need to rise to that kind of expectation. But we have done something. We have indicated to the people of Tobago that our aim is to make this island the greatest little island on the planet. And to do that, we have identified 12 pillars. And those 12 pillars have been linked to the international sustainable development goals. And those pillars are what each of our divisions use to ensure that what we do every day is connected to us finally getting to that goal of Tobago being the greatest little island on the planet. So no, what we do not have is a document that we paid some consultant a whole lot of money for and it sit down and wait and do nothing with it. What in fact we have are very bite-sized, measurable goals that we are looking towards for each of the divisions. So in my division, for example, we know that we are looking towards healthcare, and we know that we are looking towards social protection, and we know that we are looking towards those areas. And because we have linked them to the Sustainable Development Goals, we already know what those numbers are. What we've recognized, though, is that I kind of feel like after so many years in the Tobago House of Assembly, Madam Presiding Officer, that we're starting from scratch with so many of these things. So we now, in the 44th year of the THA, are putting in the systems to be able to measure those numbers, to be able to say, this is what we have to do, this is what we've done, this is what we have done has done, which in essence is a monitoring and evaluation framework. Now I say that, and I say it is because it is something that we are almost building from scratch in many instances, because even at my division, at the Division of Health, Wellness and Social Protection, we are currently building out a simple monitoring and evaluation unit, because it is not something that was there in any real sense when we came in before. It's not like we met officers there doing that, so we had to build on it. No, we had to actually create the unit, and we just successfully advertised and interviewed, and we now have a monitoring and evaluation coordinator who is getting her feet wet, and we are working strategically, because it's almost impossible to do everything at the same time. So for some of the projects that we are building out now, a key part of building it out includes the monitoring and evaluation framework, so that going forward, we have the data. So that going forward, we have the quantitative and qualitative knowledge to say, yes, we are productive. Yes, we've spent this $1 million and we got what we expected out of it. Or no, we spent the whole set of money and it really didn't work. And this is time to stop, reevaluate, and pivot. And may I say to my colleagues, as I've said it to the staff at the division, there is nothing wrong with identifying that something that you've done is not working. There is nothing wrong with identifying that and identifying that early and quickly, and then pivoting, and then changing your direction so that we don't keep doing what they did for 21 years that got us to this point, Madam Presiding Officer. So it includes all of us, even at this point, Madam Presiding Officer, when the budget statements are being prepared. The circular coming out of the division with responsibility for finance is very clear. It speaks to ensuring that all of the projects that we put a monetary figure towards is linked to these goals, these achievements, these outcomes. It speaks to that. So it is now up to us, again, all hands on deck. It is now up to us, all hands on deck, ensuring that what we write, what we budget for, and then what we spend actually makes sense and gets us to the point of productivity. As I said, Madam Presiding Officer, the aim is not to be very long. But I want to tell a little story. And yes, on this Carnival Thursday, it seems like everything that I say is revolving around pan. But forgive me with this one. At the finals last weekend, as I made my way to the drag, by the way, we were able to honor one of what I would call our fallen soldiers of pan by creating that drag in his name and in his honor. And I see the secretary with responsibility for food production smiling because it was she boy, Mr. Vetno. While on that drag over the weekend, somebody came up to me, Madam Presiding Officer, somebody who I've seen around. I am not friends with them, but you know the face, you see them around. And the person called me Faith Sandy. And I looked at them, I said, wait, like you know more about me than I know about me? And he was standing next to another gentleman. And the gentleman was like, kind of confused too and said, Sandy? And he said, yes, I know she father. And he looked at me and he said, and so Sandy from Plymouth is your father? And I said, jokingly, well, that what my mother tell me, Madam Presiding Officer. And he has not denied that he is my father. Now, I say that to say this. Even though most people know me as either B. Israel or Brebna, and most people see the doctor and the professional side of me, the fact is that half of me is a Sandy from Goat Rock in Plymouth. And those of you who know the Sandys from Goat Rock in Plymouth knows what that means. Now, I am saying that because I recognize that my name and my face has been plastered all over the place. And I had to decide, Madam Presiding Officer, whether I would address it or not, but I am going to, and I am going to because what we are talking about here is productivity. Minority Councillor, what we are talking about here is productivity. I have the responsibility, Madam Presiding Officer, of managing what may be, and I'm glad the minority leader, again, still absent, spoke to the responsibility of a secretary in the Tobago House of Assembly. And I have the responsibility of managing health, which relates to the whole healthcare system, hospitals, health centers, all of that, in and of itself, a ministry by itself in Trinidad. Wellness, which includes public health, which in and of itself speaks to all of the municipalities that deal with the public health inspectorate and waste management and so forth in Trinidad. And the third arm is social protection, which is an entire ministry in Trinidad. So the responsibility in Tobago, and I want Tobagonians to recognize that, the responsibility in Tobago for secretaries is really that multiple of what happens with ministers in Trinidad. And may I also add that the responsibilities of the administrators in Tobago is multiples, because the ministries in Trinidad have a PS, and a deputy PS. And some have more than one deputy PSs. So we have a situation here where health, wellness, and social protection is managed, and it is compared to basically 3 ministries in Trinidad. So yes, earlier this week, Madam Presiding Officer, I made a decision because I needed to ensure that the organization that I manage is productive. I made a decision to speak to the employees who are housed at Signal Hill. And I wanted to speak to them specifically because part of the 44 priority projects of the Tobago House of Assembly for this year is the refurbishment and works at Signal Hill. And it includes 3 huge projects. One is the creation, finally, of a task force structure. Because right now, Madam Presiding Officer, they literally work out of I wouldn't even say a cow shed, because 2 cows can't stand up in there together. That is what task force currently works out of. And part of the 44 projects that includes works to Signal Hill includes an entire building for task force so that they have a full workshop to do what we need them to do. The other part of it includes working on a mechanical workshop there so that they have everything that is needed. And if you remember, Madam Presiding Officer, last year, I think it was, there was a whole big protest up Signal Hill because the employees there were talking about it being not a safe place, and they brought in the media and all of that. And to be honest, when the media contacted me then, I said to them, run with the story, because it's true. Where they are working is not the best. It's not the best conditions. It is not. You run with the story because it is true. And the third thing that we are working on up there is a lab. And it's a lab that we are going to start with treating with vectors, but we hope to expand to do water and food safety and all of that as we build out. Now, because I know that this is a workplace where people sit every day, and because I know that this is a priority project of the Tobago House of Assembly, where we are going to spend $7, $8, probably $9 million, I took it upon myself to go and speak to the employees there to let them know we come into the end of signing the contract. We are going to get the work started just now. Don't be surprised when you see mobilization happening up here. Because it may also affect how they work. Because, you now have a construction site connected to a workplace, and we have to look at the OSH expectations and so forth. And I said to them, this is me and Olia talking. We are going to have an honest conversation. Now remember I said that half of me is a Sandy from Goat Rock. And we had an honest conversation, Madam Presiding Officer. Now, part of that conversation included something that my colleague spoke about. Because one of the men who were there, who is a driver of a vehicle, came in slippers. And I said to him, he actually came in slippers. I actually think he probably had on his shoes, and because you see me, he put on the slippers to make a point. Because he does not have the appropriate boots. So we actually had a full conversation about that, Madam Presiding Officer. Why don't you have the boots? And we went all the way around. We actually did a deep dive, a root cause analysis kind of conversation about why he does not have the boots. And you know what it is? The new procurement laws says that even if the USH officer thinks that this specific brand of boots is the best brand because it has these requirements. The foreman or the senior officer can't put the name of the brand. They have to describe the boot and hope that when procurement goes out, procurement gets that specific brand of that specific boot because that is what is needed. And somehow that conversation did not really happen, so that when the foreman said we need boots and procurement went out and buy boots, the boots that came were the wrong boots. Now, we spent the money, which means that for us to have to buy boots for him again, we have to get the money. And yes, I did say I have to pull it out of me, because we have to find the money again after we went through the process to get the boots, because we buy it already, Madam Presiding Officer. And all of this leads to productivity again, because you know why? That same morning, 7 o'clock that morning, I was on the phone talking to somebody, because the workers couldn't get to their job because the person who was driving the vehicle couldn't get to the keys. And here we are. So a whole set of workmen sitting, waiting for the bus to come. And the bus cannot move because the key for the bus, wherever the key for the bus is, and we have lost an entire day. Now, as I said before, I wasn't planning to speak about this, but it is all about productivity. And it is these little things, Madam Presiding Officer, these little pieces that, because they are not connecting, why we are here today. Why we are at the point where we spend a lot of money. We have a lot of workers, and somehow we still can't get to all of the things we need to get to. And I would quickly give another example, because we're talking about all hands on deck, and we're talking about productivity. There was a gentleman who is a painter, and he spoke about not being able to finish a painting job. And when I asked what the painting job was, it was a very small painting job. Yeah, very small. And I said to him, but I don't know nothing about painting, and I could paint that. Why do you need another painter to finish that job? And he said to me, and it goes back to us having a conversation and listening. He said to me, it's not the painting, you know, but I need to climb up on this scaffold. And for me to climb up on this scaffold, there's a safety issue. So there needs to be another person there to make sure that when I climb up on this scaffolding, that I don't fall. And even if I fall, it has somebody else there to be a part of it, to help. And I said to him, no, I said to the foreman, there's only one painter I'd have, but he don't need another painter. He needs somebody else, not necessarily a painter. And the foreman said, you know, it's true, because it's 21 workers there and we don't need another painter. Another man could have gone with him. But it is because we did not think about it that way. In his mind, you needed 2 painters to be there. And because the 2 painters were not there, we can't get the work done. Now, I say all of that to say this, Madam Presiding Officer. When we talk about all hands on deck, we are talking about looking at the resources that we have on hand now, looking at the limited resources that we have on hand now, and ensuring that we work together to make it work somehow. And that requires, as my colleague said, you doing something that may not even be your work, or you doing something that is more than just, as the minority leader was talking about, your task. Because your task for the day might just be from there to there. But if you finish from there to there fast and early, and you could do from there to there, that is more work that you could do. And then we could do more work on the island faster. And that is why I made it my business, even though PAN is happening now, to contribute to this debate and to say to the people of Tobago, this Tobago People's Party administration is here because you decided a couple years ago that the drivers that were in the car before couldn't drive. And you, Tobago, gave us the opportunity to be here in this position so that we could work together to get this car going. But we are asking all of you, Tobago, to come on board and to be a part of this with us. Because that is the only way, with the limited resources that we have, that is the only way, Madam Presiding Officer, we would be able to do it. And I stand here proud with my team. I stand here proud in support of my colleague, supporting this motion, because it is talking about things like these and making the difficult decisions like the ones we are making that will get us to the point. And I am certainly hoping, Madam Presiding Officer, that the minority will join us, because they also want Tobago to be the greatest little island on the planet, because they too need to come on board to join us to do the work that is required for all of us. And with that, Madam Presiding Officer, I crave your indulgence. There is a celebration for juice happening at this point. I thank you.
Assemblyman Charles Plantain, you may now join us a bit.